Hello there, gear nerds cruising around YouTube, going through links and wandering into random people's documentation of their gear. This is a quick video that I decided to do as I spent quite a deal of time working on this current setup I have, and just wanted to document it for my own nerdiness, but hopefully for the enjoyment of others as well. Now, I'm going to stay right off the bat that I'm doing this on my phone. I am going to strive to hold the camera as still as possible. Sorry in advance for any shakiness. So without further ado, we're going to talk first about my guitars and my setup. One thing I want to preface is that I have bought, sold, and traded gear for months now to acquire this setup that I currently have. Um, there was a time when I considered trading that PV head, but it turns out it's really useful for what I'm doing here. So this is it. And knock on wood with that. And it's set up so that I can play any of the electrics that I have up there through this whole setup. Split out to both amps, both run simultaneous. So what we have is my primary electric is the Epiphone Studio. That's a 2007 model. All stock right now. Once I get about $200 of spending cash, I'm going to go on guitarfetish.com and just trick it the hell out. But for right now, it's all stock, and it's been a very trustworthy guitar. I love the way it plays, love the way it sounds. I have it tuned very low, tuned down to B. Currently, there are Ernie Ball 12s on there. The next strings I bought for it are Ernie Ball 7 or baritone strings. So 72 to 13s. And once I pop those on, I'm going to tune her down to A. So I like a low sound. I like a real kind of heavy, sludgy kind of riff oriented kind of thing. So that's what I'm going for there. And then I've also got the Ibanez acoustic. Got this through trade recently. Love it. Good sound. It's got the onboard tuner, whatnot, and EQ, but plays great, sounds great, works through this rig too. Noise suppressor is essential for that. So, and then I've got my bass, which it's a Brawley, which I had not heard of until I did this trade that included both the acoustic, the bass, and my 12 string. And the Brawley was actually by Keith Brawley. It was carried primarily by Mars Music before they went out of style. He referred to his instruments as like Lexuses. And I can tell you, it plays amazingly, sounds really good. Active pickups, elongated scale neck, fretboard plays incredibly. I think it's just because there's not much of a name, not many people know it, therefore there's not much of a price for them. But if you see one, I highly suggest picking it up. You notice this bridge is a little more substantial than, your average J bass or P bass bridge. So very happy with that bass. Any three of these will run direct into my pedal board. Once again, I have this set up for pretty much any eventuality as I would see it necessary. So run through the signal chain quickly. Not going to talk too much about any of these except for the ones that obviously people won't recognize. So, Boss OC3 hits it first because I found for the best response out of that, you really want as pure a signal as possible. You don't want a whole bunch of other stuff on the signal. So that's the first thing it hits, then the tuner, and then out of the tuner into the Dynacomp. So a little bit of compression there before it hits anything else. I also find that gives it an overall boost in tightness, so I like that. Into the noise suppressor. And the NS2 is my favorite gate for one major reason. First of all, of course, Boss pedals are trustworthy, but you've got the send return feature, which I use. I know not everybody uses that. A lot of people just put this in your chain. Use the send return. That's what this pedal was invented for, was that feature right there. So what that does is take anything in the loop, puts it in the circuit of the pedal. So as opposed to trying to noise gate something that's noisy before it, or noise gate a clean signal and then adding noise after it, it just takes whatever would be noisy, i.e. drive pedals. And when your clean signal's going and your gate's open, it's accessing them. When your clean signal's done, your gate closes, it doesn't access your drive pedals anymore. Fantastic. Just takes them out of the equation altogether. Love it. So, through that loop, got my wah first. Nothing special about this. It's just a GCB 95. At the time, they were running it in pink as a limited edition. And that's the time I happened to be shopping for a wah. So, you don't really see a lot of these around now. I mean, it was about, say, like 7 years ago or so at Guitar Center. So, I could see this being worth something later on in the future. But I think having it pink also kind of adds something to the board. So, little pop. Out of there runs into my overdrive. This is an EMFX 1892. EMFX are hand-built pedals. The gentleman who makes them really knows his stuff. Now, as far as the circuit of this, I've heard it referred to as a Dumble style overdrive. Whether it is based on the Dumble circuit or not, I don't know. What I can say is it's very transparent, very full, very nice. And I actually had the pleasure of acquiring a TS10 tube screamer, which for a lot of times, for a long time, was kind of my holy grail overdrive. And I actually got rid of it because of the two I use this one more. And I couldn't justify having them both on my board. So if you look up EMFX on Facebook, contact this guy, look into his work. There's demos on YouTube. This guy does fantastic work. Look him up. So out of the 1892, which primarily I'll use the 1892 for my main sound. You know, instead of amp overdrive, that's what I use. And then I got the micro amp there for leads, and no mods about this or anything. I just put the chicken head on because it's easier to hit with your foot if you need a little bit more out of it. And then out of there into the sounds. This is a bigger muff, or a ram's head, or I believe Johnny Hafer, who makes these, calls it a ram's head. It is his version of a ram's head. Johnny Hafer is a fuzz aficionado. He knows circuits. He knows vintage circuits. He knows what makes them work and how to make them better. He builds custom-built fuzz boxes. He's done them for a couple big names that I'm aware of. Don't want to name drop here, but I contacted him one day and I said, you know, what I'm looking for is basically an old New York vintage Big Muff, but with a little bit more clarity out of the EQ section, because it can be like really a little too muddy. But then it'd also be nice if I had the option to remove that out of the circuit and just get, you know, kind of tone bender. So that's what this switch is about. That's your tone, and it is much more clear than your standard Big Muff. So it's that same Big Muff fuzz, but just cutting through more, which is awesome. But then you can hit this switch here and take it out altogether. He is making production line models of these without the switch feature. I'm sure you can contact him and tell him you want that done. This is a prototype, so no LED or anything, but I am just tremendously happy with it. There was a time when I had 5 different drive pedals on this board, and between these two, I don't need anything else. So my overdrive, my fuzz, that's it. Little boost for leads on the overdrive. And then back into the NS2. Sorry for the shakiness, trying to keep this steady. Out of the NS2, we run over to the Micro Vibe. I am not big on swirly pedals. I will tell you that right now. Phasers, flangers, choruses, I think are all too much. But I do like the old rotary sound and the Univibe representation of it. Now, I know they have kind of a reissue of the Univibe for MXR and the compact pedal. but it's got the two different options where the only thing that I want is the actual effect itself, not the chorusy sound of it. And that's what the Microvibe does. I really like the Voodoo Lab pedals. I actually had a Sparkle Drive at one time, which I did get rid of because, of course, my 1892 is my overdrive. But I always wanted something else Voodoo Lab on my board. Very pleased to have this. I like that the big knobs you can hit with your foot as well if you want to kick the speed up a little bit. So out of there, we go into the Morley ABC. As you could tell, this is not a standard ABC. It looks more like an ABY. This is because this was a prototype that I got from somebody who knew someone at Morley. So instead of being able to do all three at once, you're one at a time in here. So you're either A or B or C, or switch between B or C. I have nothing in A right now because A runs the LEDs where it's at. It's kind of hard to unplug that. But also that works as a kill switch if I need it. Of course, I have my tuner, but, more doesn't hurt. And then the B or C switches between my lead signal and my lap steel signal. Rogue lap steel, inexpensive. Grab yourself one. They're like $100 and they're fun to play with. So I've been learning a little bit to play lap steel. Makes a neat sound to kind of add in here, especially when you're looping. Now, the lap steel runs into the second set of Dynacomp and NS2. You can see that's my favorite compressor noise gate pairing. So Dynacomp, then NS2, and then through the send return of the NS2, I'm running the old cheap plastic Danelectro black coffee distortion. Just gives a nice rasp to the lap steel. It's very usable for that. I had it sitting in a back room from years ago, having to plug it in and really like the way it sounded. So that's on there. Let's do the send return on the noise suppressor. Now that runs into input C. Excuse me, input B. And then the main guitar signal runs into input C. So I can switch here between those two. Runs out of here into the VP Junior. So the volume pedal controls everything. And then out of the VP Junior into the DD5, which you can see I have the stereo outs. And then I also have my tap button, which is the FS5U. And then the FS5L is the on-off for the amp distortion for the PV head. So we'll go into that in a minute. So it goes stereo out of the DD5 into the DL4, which delay looping. Very, very occasionally I will use this for delay, but mostly I bought it for its looping qualities and love it for that. So out of there, splits off to the 2 amps. So on the one side, we got my more mid-rangey, which is an early 80s PV Century head. These go cheap. If you can find one, get one. Very usable. They market it as, extended range. So you could use it for bass, you could use it for guitar. And that is true, but it's a little bit more mid-rangey than bassy, I would say. But, it is a workhorse. It's solid as crap. It's got that, you can see the saturation feature. That is an emulation of tube overdrive. So that's what my FS5 foot switch is for, the on-off for that. And that is running through an early 70s. I'm going to stand up here. Bear with me, folks. Got a kid's train table here that I'm leaning up against. 610L is from the early 70s from Sun. Very sturdy construction in this. Great sounding. There's not a ton of these around, but if you see one, get it. If somebody wants $400 or $500 for it, it's worth that. If you can get it for less, great. I was lucky enough to come across this, and I'm not trading it away for anything. You'd have to offer me quite a lot for me to get rid of this, because I know I'm likely not going to see another one. And the two of those just are a great pair together. So that's a nice mid-range kind of sound there. And then on the other side, I have my 212 Hot Rod DeVille, and this is from the first run. And through the date code, I found out that this is actually from 96. So this is the first year they were made. Got this out of a trade. And once again, I traded a a Vox AC34, a newer one, made in China, and this one's made in America. I will not let it go. I'm immensely happy